Welcome to Power Fridays Live. Good evening. Good Friday. Good Friday, Dave. I'm your host, Janelle Pulley, and my co host here.
I'm Dave Guerreso. Good to be with y'all. Welcome to the show, Kevin. Glad to have you on.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you so much for being here, Kevin. We know you could be anywhere on a Good Friday, as we some people are celebrating this wonderful day, and we do appreciate you very much for being with us this evening here on Power Fridays Live. And Kevin, I am super excited to hear your story, to learn more about you, and what brought you to being an excellent keynote speaker, a coach, and now an author. So, can you please start out with telling us a little bit about yourself?
Certainly, certainly. Actually, I was born in Gary, Indiana, and I know Janelle, you have some connection with Gary, Indiana. But that's where I was born. After that, my mom and dad were both from the South, so they ended up meeting in Gary, and my father went through some physical challenges in Gary, and I eventually decided to move back to the South. Uh, but I've lived all over. I've lived in Mississippi. I've lived in Texas. Well, I've lived the longest part of my life, which is about 27 years, in Atlanta. And I just recently moved from Atlanta in 2019 to South Carolina, where I am now. So I've kind of been all over the place, not to mention the times I moved while I was in the military, because I was in the Army for about 6 years and done a lot of moving in that. Spent time in Desert Storm. If some of your listeners remember the Desert Storm War, I was
Yes,
there.
yes. Well, thank
And
you for your service with that and being a Desert Storm veteran. I had family who participated in that as well.
well, it was my duty and my honor. Um, I've been here as I said, South Carolina since 2019, and most of my life has been centered around helping others, um, and you can really tell from the movement that I've made, even in my professions. I was a soldier. I was a firefighter for about 5 years, um, and I've been a minister for uh, over 40 years, actually. And so my life has been centered around helping people, and it just seemed a natural progression to go into coaching, and that's what I've been doing. I was certified by John Maxwell back in 2016 to be a coach, a speaker, and a trainer. And so that's kind of my background.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Kevin, and thank you so much for your service. And you and Dave share the likeness of being a trained John Maxwell
Yes,
speaker and coach, and have the same background with that. And also, you're a father, you're a husband of 40 years. I think that
yes,
is so
yes,
exciting and very important to mention. And how you've made an impact on your community, of course, your family, and now you are taking on wearing a new hat called author.
yes, yes. I just published my first book, and I believe there's going to be more to come. There's a lot more in me. Um, and honestly, to tell you the truth, I really never considered myself an author, even though I did a lot of writing ministry wise. I didn't really consider myself an author. But as I sat down to begin to write this book, it just started pouring out of me, and I realized that this was something else that was another uh, uh, factor in my life, and so I realized that I have some more in me to pour out in more books. So I don't know how many more books I have, but I know I have at least one, which I will be doing, um, and it will be coming from my dissertation, which I'm currently doing now, and it's going to be dealing with mentorship, and uh, how it affects leadership succession.
Mm. Well, leadership is very important.
Yes, absolutely.
And
Everything
Dave,
rises and falls on leadership, right, David?
Absolutely. Leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing
That
less.
is it. That is it.
IMC certified February 2015. So I was right there. We were pretty close.
Yeah, yeah.
But if your story is anything like mine, there was an evolution, right, that took you down this path, and mine has evolved to being a purpose coach specifically. But I'm curious to know, like, how did you discover that you were made to serve people and to take on the roles that you took? Thank you again for your service as a firefighter and as in the army, but then also to be a minister and now to pursue leadership and coaching. Like, how did this evolution take place, and what's the story behind how you got to where you are?
Well, this is what I believe. I believe that we all have certain gifts, certain um, inert talents within us that we're naturally gravitate to, whether we're doing it by profession or whether we're just naturally doing it. And I think that serving people is one of them. I Before I was a minister, before I was a coach, before I was anything else, my heart was drawn toward helping people, and I think that's one thing we should recognize, and other people should recognize in us. I'm sure as a coach, you have had some people to recognize that in you before you even recognize it in yourself, um, because the things that are innate in us are usually seen and usually emanates from everything that we do. Whether we're um, working on a 9 to 5 job, whether we're in a retail store, there's just something that just emanates from you, that shows people there's that gift, something that you have that no one else has,
Mhm.
or at least no one else uh, can convey it like you do, and people see it in you. So I think that was the thing that really drew me to what I do as uh, ministry, as coach, and so forth.
And as the message says, let your light so shine so that men or all people can see your good
Hmm.
works.
Right, right. That's right.
Absolutely. So tell us about your book, Kevin. I know you mentioned you're an author, but tell us, what is the book about? What is the message you're hoping to convey with your book?
The title of the book is "Embracing Your Superpower." Um, re that re, excuse me, embracing your superpower, reactivating the power of imagination. And what it's about, I, I tell you, it has a lot to do with what I've seen in my life as far as my own father, how he overcame a lot of physical challenges through a great imagination. Excuse me. But what I talk about in the book is uh, we all, whether we recognize it or not, have this superpower of imagination within us. And I know that down through the years, sometimes we allow it to kind of diminish because of um, the stress and strain of life, because of job, because of bills, because of family, because of all of these things that kind of pile up on us and kind of smother out that imagination that we have. And I think that to our demise, it will be um, uh, horrible to see that power just completely go away, because that is the most awesome power in the world. I believe it's the greatest power in the universe. I really do. Nothing of substance has been really uh, brought about without imagination.
Mhm.
All of the innovations in the world had to start with imagination. Somebody had to imagine it first and see it. I mean, think about it. There was never in the world a telephone until it was. There was never in the world a car until it was. Somebody had to imagine that thing, and 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 I found out this even when I was doing my research for the book, that our brain our brain has certain neuron paths that travel, and they travel through certain pathways that it knows. And once it clicks to the end of that pathway, it grabs onto that pathway and it holds on to that. And if we never do anything different, if we never think anything different, it'll constantly go there. And the brain is just like any other muscle in our body. It's lazy. It's lazy. It doesn't want to. It doesn't want to break new ground. It doesn't want to do things. I mean, just like when you go to the gym, your body really doesn't want to do it. Sometimes you have to force it to do it. And then
Yes.
when you want to do something different, your body rejects it. It really doesn't want to go there, but you force it to. That's just like the brain. The brain it follows the paths that are already laid for it, and unless you force it to take another route, it won't. So imagination forces it to take different routes. It forces it to open up new pathways. And when we open up those new pathways, the opportunities, the developments, the innovation is limitless.
That's great. Now, when you say superpower, who was your favorite superhero or super person that you acknowledged when you were younger?
I would say Spider Man. Spider Man was, and I say that because at the time that I was growing up, he was a teenager. He was in school, and yet he had all of these wonderful powers. But yet he kept his youth and the same type of mentality that he has as a high schooler or a middle schooler. And I just thought that was fascinating. He was not an old guy like Superman or somebody who you really couldn't relate to. And
Yes.
I've related to that, and that's why I love the Marvel comics now.
Very good.
Kevin, have you heard of Dr. Caroline Leaf by any chance?
Dr. Caroline Lee. No, I haven't. I haven't.
Definitely want to check her out. I always get a little excited when folks start talking about neural pathways and
Hmm.
the science behind it. Are you
Uh-huh.
familiar with the concept of neuroplasticity?
Yes.
I
Yes.
would love for you to talk about the significance of neuroplasticity and why it's so valuable for all of us. Like it seems like it's really complex. It
Hmm.
seems like something that might be above our heads, but the truth is, when we begin to understand how it works and what
Hmm.
the significance of new discoveries in that area are, I think it gives us all of us humans in general, an
Hmm.
opportunity to make changes that we maybe didn't think that we could change. So, talk to us a little
Right.
bit about what that is and its significance.
Well, let me say this. I think that we are naturally resistant to change, and because we are, unless we're forced to change, we really don't. We don't like we don't like it. Um, but the brain needs to be forced to do things different. If we don't, we'll constantly stay in the same mode of travel, and that's why I was thinking about this just the other day. That's why it's important for us to not stick to routines all the time. Find a different way to drive from home to work. Find a different way to do different activities that you do every day. Otherwise, your brain is going to constantly stick in that same vein that it's normally used to because it doesn't want to change. And if you allow it to, it will stay in there, and it will just make it that much harder to make a change. Um, but you got to force your brain um, to accept what you are programming into it, because that's basically what it is. You're programming another activity, another route into your brain, and if you don't program it, it'll keep running the same route. So I think that if people will understand this, it would make changes in their lives much easier, and that goes from changes to their changes of their activities, changes of their habits, changes of the things that keep them back, that hold them captive. And that's another thing that I talked about in the book. Um, uh, our past habits and our past thoughts and even our past knowledge
Hmm.
um, can hold us hostage, can imprison us and keep us from being our best selves. So we have to understand that I cannot allow my past to be my prison. Jim Rohn said something. He said that our past should be our teacher, or and that's paraphrasing, but he basically said we should learn from our past.
Yes.
So we should, yes, our past is good. It teaches us, but it should not imprison us. We should
I
never
totally
we should
agree.
never be imprisoned by our past, and that's what we got to understand. I, I I I appreciate the past for what it has taught me,
Yes.
but I've got to move on from that.
Well,
So
I truly believe that. And I know that Dr. Bruce Lipton said in the first 7 years, we're being programmed.
hmm
And so when you think about our past and you think about that first years of your life up to like
hmm
7 is what Dr. Bruce Lipton, and then of course some studies say with your brain it's like you're not it's not fully grown and developed until you're 25 years old.
hmm
So can you tell us a little bit about like how do you really look at your programming that you've had as a young child up until that time where the experts say that your brain's like fully developed,
hmm
because I know that it shapes you, it molds you, and sometimes it makes you, and sometimes
right.
in our lives we're stuck in the
hmm
past with our actions and with our habits and daily activities.
hmm I would say this, and I think I mentioned this in the book as well.
Okay.
Um, when is the best time to begin to allow our imagination to be formed, or to really grow and mature? Of course, when you're younger, it's much easier. Your brain and your thought patterns are much more malleable. Um, but the best time is when you recognize that your patterns have caused you to be in a rut, um, and it's never too late. I say I say the only time it's too late is the last time you open your eyes and close your eyes for the last time. So
Mm.
if you're not dead, you can change. If you're not dead, you can reprogram. So don't, that old saying, you can't teach a old dog new tricks. Don't believe it. Don't believe. One thing that I mentioned also is about children. They are so open, and if you notice children, how their imagination just, I mean, it's just a beautiful thing. And if we could get our education system to understand that, um, number one, all children aren't alike. We have this education mandate that wants to standardize everything. They want all children to do the same thing, to have the same type of knowledge, to have the same type of gifts. But that is harming not only our children but us as adults, because we have been going through that same type of education system, and it creates adults who have this mindset of standardization. It's everybody has to be the same, everybody has to think the same, everybody has to go the same route. But they even teach children, don't color outside the lines, don't. It's hampering their creativity. And if
Yes.
you'll notice, one of the main uh, um, uh, gifts and one of the main elements that they're looking for in leaders today is creativity.
Innovation, yes,
Yeah,
that's what they call
because
it.
yeah, because it's so rare now, because we have trained people coming up through the school systems to be standard, and to follow these standardized practices. So the innovation now is highly lacking.
Mm. And imagination leads to innovation.
Yes, yes, yes. But if you don't have imagination, you're following the same path that everybody else has done. And if you follow the same path that everybody else has followed, you're going to get the same thing that everybody has gotten. So why it doesn't make sense.
It does not.
One
I
of
agree.
the I was going to say one of the things that I feel like stands out when we talk about creativity and innovation is that when it's happening, when it begins to happen in one, it's infectious. It
hmm
spreads, right?
hmm
And so the moment one person sees another person's creativity come to life, it inspires them to want to create
hmm
themselves, and that continues to multiply across people, doesn't it? And I
Yes,
think that's
yes,
the exponential impact of using your imagination. So
yes, yes.
powerful statement. I think it has the ability to really transform entire nations, the whole world, if we were to allow this thing to set fire.
Absolutely. But the problem with that is that often not only do you have those who become imaginative and it becomes infectious, but you have those who would want to put a damper on that imagination because it sheds light on them because they're just following this standard practice, and they don't want that light to shine on them. They There are people who have established standards of knowledge, established standards of practice, and they don't want their standardized knowledge and practices to be interrupted. I say that the phrase "don't rock the boat" was probably created by somebody who had a standardized practice of knowledge, and they didn't want anybody to challenge that. And but without challenge, there is nothing new that ever happens. And imagination creates challenge.
Yes, and without building those muscles, because
Hmm.
even when you talk about building your brain muscle
Hmm.
and building you going into the gym, you're there's a challenge that you give upon your body, there's a
Hmm.
challenge you give upon yourself, and as you can relate to being in the military, you
Hmm.
were, I mean, like I'm not sure what age you were, but
Hmm.
it's like you expect me to run how far in what time
Right.
limit,
Uh-huh.
and with how much weight did you have to carry,
Hmm.
and just to think about that, not everybody goes through that rigor
You're
in their
right.
life.
You're
No
right.
one goes
Hmm.
through the basic training of life is
Hmm.
different from everyone.
Right. Right. And speaking of the change in physicality, that is something that I received from my father. I lost my father in 2000. Well, I don't say I lost. He passed away in 2019. 2019. Um, and he and this is a story that has really inspired me throughout my life. When he was in his mid 20s, he became well. He had a disease that he didn't recognize that he had. He didn't know he had a degenerative spinal disease that started affecting him when he got in his mid 20s. So he and my mother were getting ready to get married, and this thing shows up. Uh, they decided that they would go ahead and get married, and he was going back and forth to the hospital because he was a military veteran as well. Um, and they found this disease and told him that he was going to have surgery. And he and my mom had just gotten married. They just had a child, and um, they were getting ready to have another child actually. And he said he wanted to wait until the second child, which was my sister, was born, because he didn't want to, have my mom going through the pregnancy and all of that by herself. So my mom had the baby. Shortly after she had the baby, he went into the hospital, and they had to do surgery on his spine.
Mm,
Uh, when they did the surgery, my dad ended up a quadriplegic.
mm,
Um, couldn't move anything from his shoulders down, and so he came home a quadriplegic. He was a quadriplegic for about 3 years, and my dad told me stories about how he cried because he couldn't even scratch his nose when it itched. He'd have to call somebody in to scratch his nose. Uh, he, my dad was a man who was a real man's man. He was, he enjoyed doing things with his hands. I mean, there was nothing that my dad could not do. So he couldn't see himself um, confined to a bed for the rest of his life. He couldn't see himself not being able to care for his family. He couldn't see himself not being able to play with his children. My dad could only imagine himself getting up and walking. My
mm,
dad could only imagine himself being able to function with his family and do the things that he was used to. So after 3 years, my dad began to walk on a walker first, and then he began to walk on a cane. And for the rest of his life, I saw him walking on a cane. Um, and that my dad would do some things that were so amazing. I mean, he would do some things that you wouldn't see someone with. all of their faculties do. I mean, I would see him. He was such an amazing man. He would get up under his truck and take out a transmission and pull it out and
Wow.
rebuild it by himself now. And this is a man who's on a not on a cane now. You know, he still has trouble with his functions of his legs and his back, but he would do that kind of thing, and it would just be amazing. I remember one story he told me about when my parents. This is a time when all of the kids were grown and out of the house, but he and my mother were still at the house, and um, we had a house that had a driveway and a carport, but it didn't have any covering over the carport.
Mm.
So he he said he didn't want to see my mom have to walk in the house from the car when it's raining and that kind of thing, and have to cover herself up. And so he wanted to build a covering over the carport. Now this, remember, this is supposed to be a handicapped man. Um, so he said he would lie in the bed at night and just imagine, how can I do this by myself
Mm.
and take care of this situation. So my mom was preparing to go to a conference out of town. He asked my mom how long she was going to be gone, and she told him. He said, "When you going to be back now?" She told him, and he said, "Okay, let me figure out how I can do this." And so he built by himself now a carport with a covering over between the house and the carport by himself. Now he knew that if
Wow.
he had told my mom what he was going to do, she wouldn't
Yeah.
have allowed him to do it. But he was just
Yes.
such an amazing man, I tell you, and that is given me confidence that I can do anything. That is just caused me to realize, if you can imagine it, if you can think it in your mind, if you can create that visual picture, you can
Yes.
do it. I learned that the same brain pathways or neurons that are created while you are thinking about doing something, when you visualize it in your head, are the same ones that are uh, uh, activated when you actually do it. So you're basically doing the same thing twice. You do it in your mind, you
Mm.
create it in your imagination, and then you create it out of physical particles. So it's just amazing.
Wow, that is an amazing story. And I know, I feel the same way your Bob probably felt. It's like, what in the world? But whenever you see
Mhm.
everything manifested, there's
Uh-huh.
nothing to say.
Right,
Like, but
right.
thank you. I'm like, are you okay? And I appreciate this. And it's so
Yeah.
amazing. And it just brings me, to the story about, Jesus,
Mhm,
having something to do
mhm,
and a life to fulfill.
mhm,
And here we are. It's like, you imagine that I'm going to have to take these steps to provide someone salvation? Of course, he was a carpenter. So
mhm.
when you
Yeah.
shared that story, all I could think about was Jesus being a carpenter and building up to this moment in his life to live out his what he was created for. And
Mhm,
so I can imagine that your dad was like, I was created for more than
mhm,
this.
mhm.
And here you
Absolutely.
are building bridges better and
Mhm.
sharing, Kevin, with us about how to build bridges better and building yourself to be a better person
Right,
and to
right.
think and to imagine, what's possible and
Mhm.
then let your light shine. And
Right.
so this is a phenomenal conversation.
I tell you, anytime I get an opportunity to share the stories about my dad, it's a wonderful time for me. Um, of course, I miss him tremendously, um, but these stories will live within me forever.
Kevin, I'm curious how else has just the inspiration that your dad gives to all of us, how has that impacted your life and your sister's life, right? And
Mhm,
some of the challenges and battles that you've had to face, and
mhm.
the last couple decades for sure. I'm sure there's story after story that you could share.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I can share a story that is even closer than a couple of decades ago. I when I moved here to South Carolina, um, I had been well. Let me back just a little bit. Before I left Atlanta in 2017, um, I was diagnosed with multiple myeloma, which is a blood cancer, and they told me that it was in a smoldering stage, and that if it didn't progress within 2 years, I probably wouldn't have to have any kind of treatments at all. So I'm good. Okay, I move here. Um, 2 years later, in 2019, of course, my father passed away that March. 1 month after well, 2 months after I'd moved here. That was, of course, traumatic time for me. And then a few months later, in November or December, the doctor calls me because, of course, I was going back to the doctor back and forth just to make sure that everything was looking okay. And he tells me, well, your numbers have risen and you're going to have to, it's gone into an active state and you're going to have to get your treatments now. So in January of 2020, I had to start cancer treatments. I had to go the whole 9 yards, chemo, um, bone marrow transplant, um, everything. And so that has been something, of course. Now, when I first got the news um, that I was going to have treatments and all of that, it really took me a while to adjust and to come to a place where I accepted this. And of course, the first thing that happens, you begin to blame. Why did I get this? And you begin to ask God, why me out of everything? And then I'm talking to God. I'm actually angry with God because listen, God, I've been a minister. I've been trying to spread your word, and here I am. My father just died a few months ago, and now you're sending me through this ordeal. Um, but I took that and turned it around and said, okay, regardless of what happens to me past today, I've got a job to do. There's so many things that are still within me that I have not poured out to the world. There's so many things within me that I have not shared that I feel will help other people to build bridges. And so I went from that and I said, okay, this is not a time to be silent. This is not a time to throw in the towel. This is a time to pour out of me into the world everything that's in me.
Mhm.
Because my greatest fear is that I won't have poured out all of that's in me into the world before I close my eyes for the last time.
I'm going to leave empty.
Yes.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Die empty.
Yes.
Some of the best advice I've ever heard before was somebody who said that, right? I want to die with nothing left.
That's it. That's it.
Wow, that's powerful. Thank you for sharing that story, Kevin. That is incredibly inspiring. And I think it's amazing that despite it all, you've chosen to pour out, right? Because a lot of people turn inward at
All right.
times like that in fear. But, we know the word says perfect love casts out fear,
Mhm.
right? And so immediately you felt that love and you were able to reciprocate that and sort of pay it forward into the world, and you continue to do so. So tell us about some of the things that God's been doing through your ministry and through some of the work that you've been doing.
Well, I looked at the entire situation um, from this aspect. Um, for what 35 or so years, I was confined to the walls of a church, and and I don't say that in a bad way. I just say that was my vision at that time.
Yeah.
But now I see that God is leading me to a broader platform and saying, okay, what I'm giving you to say is not just to help people within the confines of the church, within the confines of Christianity, but it's to help everybody. because there are some people who will never come into a church. There are some people who will never come into a place where they will hear a gospel message. But when you share the good news of being able to be more than what you are now, when you share the good news of, listen, there is a pathway, there is a bridge that you can build to a better life, to a better you, to a better family, to a better way of thinking. When you share that with people, it's something that they can hold on to. It
Yes.
will give them hope and allow them to say, "Hey, listen, my pathway has not been easy. I may have come up in a broken home. I may have come up in a situation where there was a lot of dysfunction, but I don't have to stay here. I can build a bridge to a better life." And that is what I'm pushing for. That is my hope. That is my desire. I've realized that uh, people often don't recognize where they are because they've never really uh, thought about why I'm here and how did I get to where I am. And I say this is one of the things that I talk about is people don't recognize their own story because they've been living in life that their story is being written by somebody else. And when you don't write your own story, then you have a problem because you become a extra in somebody else's story. Because your story is going to be written one way or another, whether you write it or somebody else writes it. But if you don't write it, somebody else is going to write it, and you're just going to be an extra. And you know what happens with extras? They just have little bit parts and whatever the writer wants them to say. And the problem is more people are reading their story and not writing their story. They're reading about what people say about them, what people think about them, the way that people want them to go. And they had not sat down and just thought about, okay, why am I here? Where did I cross the lines and get to a place where I'm in this place that I am now? And until you do that, you'll never be able to get to a place where you can actually start leading yourself, which is the number one thing, leading yourself.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's entering the realm of purpose. I love
Yes.
this. I love this part of the conversation too because it's what I do. It's what fires me up. And
Mhm.
you're right. I think a lot of times, and I'll say that a lot of times that passion and that purpose is
Mhm.
derived from the pain and the challenges, and
Absolutely.
that's part of the story. But you're
Hmm.
right. Not a lot of people spend time examining that part of their lives and then drawing from it what God's been trying to show them all along, which is
Hmm.
the very thing that He's created us to do.
Right.
Like, we
Right.
know that there's brokenness. We
Hmm.
know that there's hardship. We know that life comes. Like, we all have experienced it or are on our way to experiencing it one way
Right.
or
Right.
another. But very few of us recognize that there is a purpose in that.
And
Right.
I find that a lot of times people, rather than sit down and examine that, they run from it. They don't want that to be a part of their life, uh, especially the bad parts. They don't want to deal with that. They want to shove that
Hmm.
under the rug, and because I don't want anybody to see that. And I tell you what, social media is a great thing, but social media often creates this picture of false happiness, false hope, and it's really just uh, a snapshot of life. They give you the highlight reels. Not They don't give you the practice and the hard times and the hardship. They give you a highlight reel, and that is not what real life is. When you deal with real life, you're going to have some problems. You're going to have some situations that you don't like, some situations that you're ashamed of, some situations that make you cry, all of that. But it's all a part of making who I am and where I am at this point in life.
Hmm.
Yeah, and another thing that comes to mind, Kevin, is like as we think about some of these issues and why people don't process it. I think as we go through life, we're taught, like you were talking before, how the school systems train us,
Hmm.
but also we're taught early on sometimes, like even guys, like real men don't show weakness, real men
Right,
don't cry.
right.
There's some of that stuff going on too.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of it, as we experience pain, we build our own self defense mechanisms into it.
Mm-hmm.
And a simple example I like to share all the time is I was hurt by words a lot when I was young. And so I built up this wall that basically did the sticks and stones motto, right? Like I sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will
Right.
never hurt me. But
Mm-hmm.
what I did is I expected other people to adapt to that same principle. So when
Mm-hmm.
I spoke words that were hurtful, I was almost surprised that they were so hurt by it and
Mm-hmm.
didn't have that same exterior shell. And
Right.
so you take that same type of principle and you apply it to pain and all those things we go through. We build those walls, we build those shells,
Mm-hmm.
and now we're not able to crack into that and draw out from from that what we were always intended to be, and
Right.
nobody else can. So going back to the light, right, and being a light in the world, this is why at this time in human history that
Mm,
light needs to shine brighter than it's ever shined before. That
Definitely.
love needs to be poured out on people more than it ever has before, because that is the only thing that has the power to crack that shell and get people to see, like, and even outside the walls of the church. This is
Mm-hmm.
this is why it's important, right? Because
Right.
I'll say this: I came to Jesus Christ in my office at work in the marketplace, Kevin. It didn't happen in like church had an influence on it,
Uh-huh.
but so did the person ministering to me in my office at work. So it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter where you are,
Right.
love will find you. And if we're
Yes.
willing to open up our shell and expose our hearts for who we really are, even at the expense of potentially being hurt from it, that
Mm-hmm.
is the only way that love can pour out from us. We can't put a wall in front of it in fear, because if we put the wall up, not only can somebody not access us and hurt us, we
Mm-hmm.
also can't access another heart, because the same door that shuts our heart off from the world is the same door that allows us to love others well. So
Mm-hmm.
you can't do both at the same time.
Right.
So
You're right.
yes. Yes, yes. So as we look at the hour, and as what you've shared tonight has been very impactful, powerful, and amazing. And of course, from the imagination, when again God's word in Jeremiah 29:11, it says, for I know the plans that I have for you, the plans to prosper you and not to harm you, and plans to give you a hope in a future. Well, Kevin, I know with you building bridges to better, with your company, with your speaking, with your opportunity, with your book that you've authored, that is exactly what you want for others.
Absolutely. It is my heart and it is my purpose to help people to understand where they are, to write, live, and lead through their own story. And if they do that, this world will be a better place.
Yes, yes. And thank you so much for that. And Kevin, I know that you have a website and there's a way to find you. What is the best way if someone wanted to reach out to you, if upon listening to this broadcast and listening to the replay? What is the best way someone can reach out to you?
You can reach me at, of course, the website that you see scrolling at the bottom of the page. But you could also email me. My email is Coach KD63 at gmail.com. And also, I'll be in Atlanta on May the 5th. We'll be doing our official book launch. We will be doing that at Mercer University in Atlanta, um, 3001 Mercer University Drive at the um, uh, McAfee Student McAfee Lounge at
Okay.
6:30 p.m. Sorry.
So that's Mercer University at
Yes.
6:30 p.m.
Hmm.
on May 5th.
That's it.
Thank you. We'll make sure that we have the information and posted in the chat as well in the social media.
Great. Great.
And
And I look forward to seeing all of you there. Hopefully, it'll be standing room only.
yes, we do want standing room only. And the name of your book,
The name of my
Embracing Your Superpower.
yes, and you can find it on Amazon or anywhere where books are sold.
Awesome. And is there any final message that you would like to leave us with today, Kevin?
Yes. Well, I would like to just say, no matter where you are in life, no matter how far you feel that you have to come in order to reach your goal, there is a bridge to better. You can find and build that bridge. And I'm one that has built bridges, and I will help you to construct the bridge to your better. Just contact me, and we'll work together to build that bridge.
Very great. Thank you. And anything for you, Dave?
Yeah. So what comes to mind is you were so inspired by your father, Kevin,
Mhm.
and you've taken that now and you've made it into something that you can share with the world. And I just got to say, the world needs fathers. It's
Absolutely.
something I'm passionate about, right? Because I feel like so many missed out on
Mhm.
what it means to have a loving father that had their back no matter what, and showed them what it means to be a man in this world. And
Mhm.
so I just want to say thank you for being that father in the world and for sharing, everything that your dad blessed you with, both your earthly dad and your heavenly dad. So
Yeah.
appreciate you, Kevin.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes, and thank you so much for joining us on Power Fridays Live this evening on Friday, the Good Friday, which you share with us a powerful message. And I'm so excited about your book, Embracing Your Superpower, because it's all about power.
Yeah.
And thank you so much. And as we say here on Power Fridays Live, be, do, and have the greatness you desire, because the greatness is in you and the greatness is in your imagination as well.
Yes.
So thank you so much for that message tonight, Kevin, and take care and be blessed, everyone. Thanks for joining us, and we'll be back next week on another episode of Power Fridays Live at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Facebook and YouTube. Take care and be blessed.